Welcome to the APNIC 52 security track or the first TC. My name is Adli Wahid. I work for APNIC and I'm here to host the two sessions that we'll be having today. So today will be, should be quite exciting. We have three presentations in this session and three in the next one. But before we get started, let me read a couple of things for you for the housekeeping, for housekeeping purposes. Number one, be mindful of the code of conduct that we have. It's published on the APNIC 52 website and in the chat box. If you have any questions later on or comments, you are free to put them in the Q&A box. You can raise your hand, but I'm not sure if we have time to take questions from the crowd today, but we'll see. If we have extra time, we can actually do that. And keep your eyes on the chat box area as well, because from time to time, we'll be sharing some notes and some updates on events or other activities in the conference. And last but not least, I would like to thank all of the presenters. They are from all over the places, and I'm very excited to have all of them. They will all have, each presentation will be 15 to 20 minutes long. And hopefully everybody will enjoy the presentations today. So without further ado, I would like to invite the two speakers that we have to do the first presentation, the two Johns, John Christoph and John Belanger from NetScout. And they will be talking about the analysis of the Lazarus Bear Armada LBS DDoS campaign. Sounds very exciting. John, if you're ready, maybe you can start sharing your slides. Awesome. All right, the floor is yours, or the virtual space is yours. Go ahead.
Hello, good morning.
Morning.
Okay, great. Yeah, today we'll be presenting our analysis of the Lazarus Bear Armada, the LBA, as we call it, DDoS campaign. The presenters today are myself, John Belanger, and John Christoph. We're both analysts with NetScout and their CERT group. The LBA DDoS campaign was a Bitcoin extortion campaign conducted between August of last year and ending around February of 2021. As we were investigating this campaign in our data sets, we found very consistent attack methodologies and targeting techniques. We found that the campaign clustered very closely around the attacker chose vector, target type, target country, and industry. They were very consistent about their choices in that as they moved through the campaign, and this allowed us to easily find the LBA activity in their data set. And it was just looking at those clusters, it was clearly distinct in the overall data set. And we use big data techniques to find these. And we believe this is the first time a DDoS extortion campaign has been analyzed from start to finish on the scale. So we're excited to present our data. Just a quick agenda. This will be a quick talk, but I'm just gonna go through some DDoS attack types and methods, just some basics real quick. Talk a little bit about our data collection, just to give you an idea of what we're doing, and then we'll talk about LBA and talk about some, the campaign and talk about some conclusions. So there's basically two types of DDoS attacks. The first one is your classic traffic flood. This is where an attacker will initiate or contact a botnet and will initiate traffic floods from each of the bots. Fairly straightforward. They can use a botnet command and control or something called a booter stressor service. Basically, they use them for the same thing. The second type of attack is what we call reflection amplification. It's similar in that the attacker will connect to a botnet command and control or booter stressor service, but instead of controlling botnets to send the traffic flood, what they'll do is they'll initiate packets to open services on the internet. This could be DNS, CLDAP, NTP are the most common ones. SIP servers, Memcached. There's a list of about 30 different services on the internet that you can do this with. Instead of the services replying to the initial request back to the attacker, they'll send all of their replies to the victim, since the attacker spoofed the initial source address to be that of the target. And the replies are bigger than the initial, by quite a bit, than the initial payload. So we call this reflection and amplification. And this is just the same thing from the point of view of the network. The attacker can be on any network. The boot or stressor service, or the botnet CNC, can be on another network. They initiate they'll contact the bots, or they'll initiate the reflection amplification on many other networks on the internet, and then those networks will all together send the traffic to the target. This is simplified. There's a lot of different combinations. The attacker could actually use a botnet to initiate the reflection. So, just keep in mind that this is kind of a simplified view. As we collect data for each of the DDoS alerts over the internet, we get this in the form, we call them attacks. We get them in the form of alerts, and each of these alerts represent a DDoS attack at a point in time, and they'll contain start, stop, the amount of maximum throughput bandwidth, the types of DDoS that we sensed. We compile all of these into big data storage, and then just use big data search. And in our case, we're actually using SQL. We found that to be the most flexible, since we could, depending on our analysis needs, we could add other data sets as needed. And this is just an example of the kinds of things we can do with our global view on the DDoS landscape in our data set. For instance, we can do post-enrichment using GeoIP of our DDoS alerts. And then we can add another data set. In this case, it's really simple, just region to country mapping. And then we can use that region mapping to classify the alerts. And then this is just an hourly sum by region of all of the DDoS alerts going on in January 2021. The total throughput. So you can actually see the different spikes as we went along in the months from the different regions. Just an example. And then we finally get to LBA. We started hearing about this. I think, like everyone in media, we were also involved in some of the initial attacks, attempting to mitigate them. We would learn about them. We would look on our data set. Manually, we would try to figure out, was this attack here? Usually we would find them. But of course, there was probably more that we weren't hearing about. As we collected several incidents over the first few weeks of the campaign, we realized that the attacker was being fairly consistent about the types of servers that they were attacking. And we hadn't to that point enriched our data set with passive DNS data, but at this point we decided to do that. And in doing that, that allowed us to just do a simple search, regex search for host names that look like DNS or VPN. And prior to this, we had been enriching the data set with industry, which is NAICS. If you're not familiar, that's just classification for industry. So each of these colors represent a different industry, the number of alerts on a certain day in a certain industry for host names that match common DNS or VPN host names. And you can see the ramp up mid-August. That's exactly when the campaign started, and it just continued for the rest of the year. So this allowed us to see, mostly it was financial, but they definitely did branch out, and we certainly didn't hear about them all, but we could see them in our data set. this gave us a really great view. And so this is just taking the financial attacks. We did something else too. We actually looked at the Shodan data. So I just built just a really simple random forest classifier based on Shodan open ports, SSL certificate data, that kind of thing that you can find in Shodan. And we classified it so the target could have been one or more of these different server types. And as you can see, the signal is very plain. Right about mid-August, it ramps up, and we start seeing especially DNS servers and VPN. We actually predicted this as well, that during the COVID-19 pandemic, that VPNs would probably start becoming more of a target. And sure enough, that's what you see here in the gray dots. But you can see the DNS server started ramping up right with LBA, and this was actually pretty unique in the data set. And then they ramped down right about beginning of February, and they really haven't come back online that we can see. So once we understood this pattern, some NAICS were common than others, the host names. We compiled all of these alerts that we thought were candidates for the LBA campaign, and then we just analyzed the different types of DDoS. DNS amplification. So the red dots here are just how common that vector is overall in our data set, and the blue bar is the frequency for that vector for LBA. They use DNS, but they were very clearly they were favoring DNS, CLDAP, Cargen, and NTP. So they were waging a reflection amplification campaign. Cargen is not used that often in our data set, and LBA use them quite often. So this was a pretty good signature. And of course, I didn't do any of the classical TCP SYN floods, or a little bit of the reset, a little bit of those, but not as much as you see in the overall data sets. This was also a very strong signal. And then the other thing we did was look at the clustering of country. We kind of noticed this just by looking at it by eye, but once we really started to do an analysis on it, it became pretty clear this is what they were doing. They were clustering around certain countries almost day to day, week to week, certainly. Now, this isn't the same org in like one country on one day. It'll be multiple orgs in multiple industries in one country on one day, and then they'll move on to another country, and then sometimes they'll come back. We also we did quite a bit of analysis on this. We found that the attackers didn't like working on the weekends. There's hardly any activity on the weekends. They also tailored the attack time to be during the local business hours of the target. And this was, obviously to have maximum impact on that organization when they were in business, during the time of day that they're in business. So also a very strong signal there. So summary and conclusions, like I said, there was the LBA campaign definitely clustered around target type, country, industry, vertical, and vector. They had a very clear signature in our data set. This is very easy to find using big data analysis and post enrichment of our data set. And we believe this is the first time that a campaign analysis has been achieved on this scale. And they were remarkably consistent about the targeting and attack methodologies throughout the entire campaign. And we do see some copycat attacks. We'll be talking about that in an upcoming report that we have coming out. But the full scope, as you could see in our slides, the full scope hasn't materialized with that exact same pattern. And in the end, over 6 months, it was over 200 different organizations across 70 industries in 50 different countries that were impacted by this extortion campaign. So thank you for your time today, and we'll take questions.
All right, thank you, John. Yeah, so I really like it when you mentioned that attackers take a break on the weekend. So I think that's all. That's what we need, basically. Do we have any questions for John? See, you can put your question in the Q&A box, right? Or you can also, if you want, you can raise your hand. I think we still have time. If not, then I will ask one question. So I was wondering if you have any ideas or information about the price of things, John, like how much is being charged for some of the campaigns to be carried out, or just basically what are the costs of doing some of these things?
How much the attacker? The opportunity cost here is very low for the attacker. I don't know what the actual numbers are, but you know, the cost versus reward is clearly out of balance. I don't think we actually got any confirmed payment of the extortion. It was difficult to get detail on that, and it wasn't our data, obviously. So maybe John has some better figures based on his experience.
I don't for this specific one. Attacks really don't cost a whole lot to actually launch or put in motion, as probably all of you are aware, but I don't have the specific numbers either for what the going rate was.
All right. The other thing another question that I have, actually, we have a question here. Let me have a look, right? So a question from Robbie. Are you tracking any other attack campaigns using similar methodology?
Yeah, it's a great question. We're constantly on the lookout for them. Actually in the process of this campaign, we obviously became a lot more sophisticated with our data set, and we built up dashboards and different tool sets and utilities to go out and look. And we're constantly a lot of our dashboards just alert us now that something weird happened, and we're just constantly looking to refine that. I don't know. I think that this campaign was unique. We basically look at the data just in case that stuff isn't exactly telling us the big picture. We'll just look at the data line by line, week per week, and we haven't seen. That's the one thing that's notable as campaign. It just hasn't materialized in the scale yet.
All right, cool. We have a question from Kim Rodrigo. Just hang on a sec. Yeah, Kim, you can use the mic. Oh, okay, he clicked by accident, or he or she clicked by accident. No, that's okay. All right, maybe just one more. There's one more question. Okay, are you using data from this campaign to teach machine learning for machine learning purposes?
Yeah, the attacks themselves aren't, there's not a lot of predictive value there, obviously, since the attackers can just they can attack whenever. Although I'm very I pay close attention to see if there's a cluster in there. If I see any sort of clustering going on, I'm going to want to train a machine learning algorithm to try to lift that out if there's value. So like I said, during this, we did like a little simple random forest classifier to train an external data set on the targets in our data set, and that was very helpful in lifting out additional value.
All right, excellent. Maybe one last question, and is there anything that we can do as a community to, I don't know, help you or share with you so that this work can be more usable and more effectively used by everyone?
Boy, that's a good question. I'm gonna think about that. I think as a community, it would be helpful to have more enrichment data. Depending on what you mean by community, there's a lot of commercial enrichment data sets out there, and I know everybody's trying to do this, but it would, in general, if we just if you have a list of targets, it doesn't really help you. If you understood everything you possibly could about those targets, then you can start lifting similarities. And I think having more access to that data on a community basis would really help.
All right, understood. Last question, and this is the last for everybody for this particular segment from Jared. Is there any indication of the level of complexity in the attacks that may be increasing, i.e. higher use of automation and so on?
Yeah, we'll actually touch upon this on our threat report that's coming out soon. The sophistication-wise, they're using more, and even LBA did this. It wouldn't just be one vector at a time. They would use multiple vectors during a given attack against a particular organization or vertical. They're using more. They have access just to more resources to launch larger attacks. So I think that's probably the bigger thing. They're just bigger. They're more widespread. Clearly, the use of cryptocurrency is a step up in sophistication, and also multi-vector.
All right, awesome. So that's all the time that we have for this particular presentation, for this topic. I'd like to thank both of you for being part of this program with us. And for anyone out there that would like to ask more questions, feel free to reach out to the two Johns. Thank you so much. Now we move on to the second presentation. And this presentation will be done by Dr. Jeff Liu from CERT Vanuatu. He will be talking about cybersecurity incident response and island state case study. So Jeff, if you are ready, you can share your screen and start the presentation.
Hi, Adley.
Hey, Jeff.
Just give me a few seconds to share.
Sure.
Are you able to see that?
It's still loading. It says started sharing. All right. It seems that we are having a problem seeing your screen. Do you mind if we share the slides for you?
Yeah, not a problem.
Okay, we'll do that then.
So I'll stop sharing from this side.
Okay, just give us the cue to move forward once
Yep.
Once we have displayed your presentation. All right, we all set. Go ahead.
Thank you, Adley. Thank you, APNIC, and thank you for giving me and CERT Vanuatu the opportunity to present. Yeah, as Adley has just mentioned, we'll be giving just a brief on incident response from a perspective of a Pacific Island state, and hopefully provide a case study that I wouldn't say it's new, but something we came across that really contributed to how CERT Vanuatu, or the country as a whole, responding to cyber threats. So can we move to the next slide? So just a bit on the outline, just a brief set and types of incident we see in the case study, and then give some final remarks at the end. Next. So firstly, apologies for this, just a brief to set the context. From an island state perspective, we like to know and always remind ourselves from the perspective of cybersecurity, and that is the act of defending computers, servers, and mobile devices or technologies that are online. Next slide, please. However, with a country like Vanuatu, or I believe within the region, there's always that question or the view of how do we see cybersecurity, or what are the challenges or what are the positives when it comes to cybersecurity on the whole from a national level, and as far as a user who's accessing technologies or the internet itself. So from a past context, nationally, maybe we can say after independence since 1980 until just recently in the 20s, 2013 upwards. We had no clue at all about cybersecurity, nor even cyber attacks as well. Every problem or even a cyber attack happening in Vanuatu on networks or systems is always a traditional system or hardware issue that we always run through computer technicians. We tend to have no clue at all on that, and we treat it as just a problem. We have no level or clue on how severe it is, or should it be a priority or not. Next slide. Now, when it comes to the more we collaborate and the more we set priorities nationally, which later on became the core of incident response in Vanuatu, we now start to see why cybersecurity is important and why they need to be an agency that will be responsible to respond to incidents happening over the cyberspace in Vanuatu, or that involves Vanuatu on the whole. So education or educating us citizens and business houses on what cybersecurity is and why it is important is something that has been the foundation or the stepping stone to providing incident response in a way that is effective for the agency and overall for Vanuatu. And with those information, and especially awareness and capacity building, businesses and even individuals, and on the whole, the government as well, can traditionally distinguish between a hardware problem or software problem versus a cyber attack on a computer system. And that is a bonus for us when we talk about incident response, because once users have the knowledge or even a little bit of knowledge on how to actually identify an attack or a malicious activity, it is a step forward to collaborating with agencies or stakeholders involved to address those issues. Next step. And with that, while it is not really the core of incident response, but it is the overall, I would say, handbook and stuff, we have strategies and policies in which are or include how we should respond to incidents in Vanuatu. And just to mention that I think next we will be launching our national cybersecurity strategy implementation metrics, which inside it has a set framework, process and procedures to actually how an island state like Vanuatu should respond to incidents, whether it is a simple virus attack or a organized or state-sponsored attack. What should we do, or who should we contact and all? Next slide, please. So apart from the matrix itself, or the formal documents and regulations, one thing that we've realized that is contributing positively to incident response is the partnership. And I think for us, it is working quite well to our advantage, that the formalized partnership between various agencies in Vanuatu who basically address incidents or receive reports for incidents or allow normal citizens or internet users to contact us so we can help them, it is a big bonus, given that we have a small pool of capacity and expertise in the area of cyber security. Next slide. So having said that, in those strategies, implementation metrics, we do have a incident response and recovery plan that has always been CERT's #1 go-to, and actually how to respond to incident among what we see in the country. Next slide. And before we talk about the case studies, some of the threats or incidents that we respond to falls in these categories: malware attacks, social engineering attacks, phishing, insider threats being very, very common, misinformation, and of course, other related ones, which are pornography and identity-related crimes caused over our cyberspace. Next slide. Now, let's provide the team with a case study I think there have been quite a number of different incidents we've responded to over the years since CERT Vanuatu has started. But this one is a recent one and quite a big one. As I've said in the beginning of the presentation, that it actually contributed to how CERT Vanuatu or the country as a whole respond to incidents. It actually made us think or even test our incident response and recovery plan and guide. And also at the same time, it clearly allowed us to see which stakeholders or which process we have existing and which we do not have, which requires our attention to. So this one on the 2nd of March, 2021, around 2 p.m. in the afternoon, our systems, in fact, our government broadband systems network has been compromised. But however, at that time, we really had no clue at all what was happening. It was quite stealth. The malware attack was behaving very gently and quietly, and with remote access capabilities. And over the time leading up to early hours of the 3rd of March, at around 0400, that is when the attackers or invaders have, in some sense, are well invested into our systems and have seen enough, and they actually took over our all government online web presence, taken down, defaced and redirected and taken control of our systems. Next slide. However, on that note, because our systems were set up that there are mechanisms in place to actually identify when attacks happen, around early hours of 6 a.m. when people start waking up, especially our systems and security teams, we received alerts and online alerts as well and that all our systems were down, and it actually made both our systems team and security team to actually get onto it and start working to identify, basically to execute a triage and see what happened, where did it come from, how did that happen, and all other necessary information. Now, because we were under, I would say, lockdown, state of emergency, and thanks to online technology, so services that are available from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m., most of the discussions and exchange between our systems and security team were over social media platforms and also emails as well, trying to troubleshoot the issue that was in hand, and seeing where or potentially how the attackers came in. So one of the first things we've realized that yes, all our websites were down, and we took a step to check online or see if there are some posts online that have been posted. So one place we've actually used to identify that is the iZone and online media platforms as well. And we found out 2 different sources that yes, they took it down, provided a press release that yes, the government of Vanuatu has taken all systems are down, published all our government websites that were down, and even the time frame, and also notified us that who the gangs are, who's involved, and who's behind the attack. Next step. Now that actually, while we were exchanging information, collaborating, both the systems and the security team had to work extra hard to see. Now, one of the first things we've done is to actually isolate the infected systems from the other one to allow normal day-to-day services to execute. Because remember, that was around 6 a.m. leading up to 7. Work starts at 8, so we try to control it, or contain it as much as possible, and allow other parts of the network and service to be up and running while we try troubleshoot where the problem is actually. So we've, from that time until 8 a.m., we actually managed to analyze the logs which were collected, and we found out that yes, there was a malware payload which was attached via one of our loopholes on one of our websites, as seen there, they've actually inserted a a.php file. Once they are inside, they actually taken control of our system and traverse to take escalate privileges to as far as admin to actually control our whole web presence. Next slide. That is a shot of when we actually identified the malware and sandboxed it and set it up in our CERT office to see how it actually worked and what it actually done, the impacts and everything. So once we've identified that, we've actually removed everything, scanned, and ensure that there are no further impacts or distractions over our systems and network. And we found out that it has come through one of our apps or website, which allowed third party or even public to actually upload from the client side files onto the system. And from that, because there were no client side validation or verification of whether there's a malware or whatever, it actually came right in to our systems. Next slide. Now, because we are actually working through that, one of our things that were happening in the background is actually planning on how to respond to the incident fully, containing it, causing less damages, and less financial impacts, as well as reputation as well, because we've now realized that it is a organized attack, targeted attack as well. And while investigating it, the team had to report to our superiors to see how we can actually control that to a level that everyone is aware of, and there will be less impact on the government as well as the team who are involved. Next slide. And that allowed us to actually quickly get approval, seek approval from our superiors and create a press release report. So we can report to our superiors that involves the government itself, Council of Ministers, and the media at large. Because at that point, we didn't know all that was happening, just some information. We had to make sure that whatever information we put out to people who need to hear the information, it is clear enough and not too much that will avoid backfire onto our systems and security team level. But the good thing we've realized that having, apart from the technical side, which is responding to the incident itself, mitigating where the problem is, having to put out a media or let people who need to know basis allowed us to actually contain that in an environment or in an approach where less disturbance from the other side. And in a way, we could say from that experience allowed or provided us an avenue where our superiors and stakeholders involved or the public at large can trust the team who's working on it, trying to solve the issue. So yeah, while responding to that, we actually made contact with the media outlets in Vanuatu, provide them with the press release, as well as our government of Vanuatu. All ministries and directors involved are aware of it, but just enough details for them to know. And we're assuring them that it is under control, and we're working on resolving the issue. Next slide. Now, we found out that, as highlighted there, circled there, it came through the one of the app under our statistics web application platform, and that is via an upload feature. And we've stopped that, and we've also noticed that that was not the only way in. There was a backup of a backup and backdoor. So if you go to the next slide, please. Which is one was sitting in under our statistics, the other one was sitting in the Ministry of Health, one of the web portal there as well. So good thing is the logs we had were quite clear enough that both the systems team comprising of the system and the web development team, as well as the team, were working to actually identify those malicious files which are installed onto our systems. So the team has managed to remove everything, contained it, delete it, and also restore the systems again. Next slide. So yeah, at around 8:30
sorry,
to 9.
Jeff, you have 2 more minutes, please.
Yep, around 8:30 to 9, we've got back everything back and running. But that is what the interface of the web shell looked like, containing all the different potential ways of attacking the system. The good thing is, because we've gone through that, we've actually learned a lot from it and patched up our systems as well. Next slide. Lesson learned from there: strategies or agencies in for partnership and ability to respond has been the key to effectively or otherwise improve as time goes to actually respond to any incident we face. Final remarks, next slide. However, I think for our side, one thing we've learned over time during incident response and even capacity building and consultation is that our cultural norms and values are a kind of strength for us to actually effectively communicate incidents, even information across all stakeholders, which allowed us to not to stress ourselves too much or even have these issues when responding to the incident going out of control. That is about all from us here. Thank you very much for your attention.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jeff. And thank you for sharing that interesting case study. I'm sure it was good practice for the new set. We have lots of questions actually for you, but I think we are only able to take a few, maybe 1 or 2 for now, and we'll reserve the rest till the end. Or if you want to answer them in the chat box while the next presentation is going on, you can do so as well. So I'll take one. So the first question is from Jobens. He asked, has the mindset of your local IT admins changed in terms of reporting incidents to CERT Vanuatu? And what are some of the challenges you encountered in trying to get their buy-in? Maybe you have 20 seconds to answer this one.
Thank you. Short answer to that, yes. All the time since 2018 until now, mindset has been changed, but it didn't come easy. We are the CERT team and partners had to work really hard to get them to firstly to trust us, and secondly, work in partnership to address a common issue or problem that not only CERT faces, but everyone involved face on a day-to-day basis.
All right, thanks. One more question. Apart from just having fewer people than the CERTs in larger countries or organizations, what have you found you have to do differently from bigger CERTs? What are the main problems arising from having fewer people in the team?
Oof, that is a good question, and I wish I had a good answer to that. But from the top of my head, first things first, capacity, expertise has been always the big challenge for us. And at the same time, proper tools or good tools to automate processes and system which will actually help a small team would be an advantage. And maybe finally, a constraint for us every time as we go forward is the financial implications. And I guess the big one for every other security team or person is the unknowns. It is a challenge and a scary part of being in either CERT or being a security professional.
All right. Okay, so we have actually a few more questions for you, but we'll take that up later, or maybe if you can have a look at them, you can answer them via the chat, Jeff. With that, thank you so much for being with us. And I'm sure our participants also appreciate you being with us today. So next, we are going to the last speaker for this particular session, which is a good friend of mine from Mongolia, Ogo Mensaihan from MN CERT CC. And he will be presenting about the supply chain security incident in Mongolia. Ogo, if you are ready, the space is yours.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, all good.
Adli, can you hear me?
Yes,
okay.
I can.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see you. We can hear you.
Okay, good. So Good morning, everyone, and thanks, APNIC, for this great opportunity. So my name is, the full name is a long one, Tomburu Mintsahan, and everyone calls me as a Ogo. So I'll be talking about some supply chain attacks that were started in Mongolia and within like last 18 months from this 18 months period. So, okay, so before I get into the presentation, I just wanted to give a brief overview of who we are and what we do, just to lay some background. So we at the CERT, we have been established in 2014 as a security community meetup, and it was more of like a from bottom-up approach. And in 2015, we have been transformed into non-governmental and non-profit organization. And our operations include the information sharing. We try to share different various information within different groups of people, different constituents. And when there's an incident, we try to be a neutral party to coordinate it. And we try to raise the public awareness on the security issues of the technology. And we do some capacity building trainings, and Adli was one of the instructors that has been given a training. So thank you very much for that. So internationally, we are a member of the Asia Pacific CERT and are also FIRST. So again, before I go into the supply chain tax details, I just want to give a brief overview of what I mean by supply chain attacks. So supply chain attacks targets the less secure elements of the supply chain. And what I mean by that is, like, when there's a target organization, the attacker tries to, instead of directly targeting the organization, attacker attacks it through some vendor, supplier that is a third party to the target organization, so that it takes advantage of the weak security of the supplier without confronting the target organization itself. So a good example of this is the infamous Target attack that happened in 2013 in US. And the Target supermarket has been attacked, has been penetrated through its HVAC provider. So that was a good example and very costly example of how the supply chain attacks work. And the more recent one would be the SolarWinds attack that has been devastating the world since like last November, December in 2020. So through the network management software, the attackers were able to penetrate into various US government institutions and other companies. Okay, so I'll be talking about 3 supply chain attacks that has happened in Mongolia within the last 3 months. And the first one happened in spring of 2020, the earliest one. And in this case, the adversary attacked a publisher company. So it was a publishing and printing house company. And it was a quite widely used publisher in Mongolia. And they use a USB drive for their daily operation. So what people do with the publisher is, like, when you are like printing your book, then you bring your manuscript on the USB drive and to give it to the publisher. And because since the file is big, etc., right? So USB drive is the essential part of their operation. And once the adversary penetrated the publisher, they have distributed the malware through the USB. So everyone who went there to for some publishing work and brought a USB drive had their USB infected. And there has been various victims fall for this, including the mining companies, mining contractors, government agencies, etc. This supply chain attack was not very much sophisticated. It was more opportunistic. And they used the plugins for initial entry. And they used the legitimate antivirus name for their binary to disguise. So for the adversary, we suspect it's the APT group called Tempax. So they have been known by at least in Mongolia with the COVID-19 themed phishing emails, which was getting distributed quite broadly. So this is the one. It's a Mongolian lure document that the Tempax was using to fish targets. And the Mongolian text is pretty much the meaning that when the coronavirus first emerged in January of 2020, it was a report from the Embassy of Mongolia in China to back to the home country, and it was so this document was cited in the reported in the checkpoint report. And the Tempax is also known as Mustang Panda, Bronze Dudley, Vicious Panda, with the different vendors given their different names. And they are known to be using those kind of tools. And they are suspected to be a Chinese-speaking group. The Tempax targets to gather the geopolitical and economic intelligence, NGOs, and political and law enforcement organizations in South and East Asia. So let's move on to the supply chain attack number 2. So the second attack happened in summer of 2020. So in this case, the adversary has targeted a software vendor. And the software vendor had software products of e-office solutions. And they had the customers of like a huge customer base. And out of them were like 430 government agencies and more than 100 private business entities. So once they got into the software vendors network, what they did was they sent an email to the customers to please update your software. And it was a legitimate email. It was not spoofed. And hold on a second. And so the email was pretty much saying, please update your software. And when you are a customer of the software vendor and when you are a customer of the software and your software vendor sends you an update, what you do, you just update your software. And that was a very clever mechanism. A lot of government agencies fell for this, including a lot of high-profile victims. And it was a new and smart strategy that we have seen. It was very highly targeted. And the one thing interesting about this attack was it had a huge malware sample, like 39 megabytes. And the sample had some similar functionalities as hyperpro samples. So for the adversary for this one, we believe it is the APT group called Lucky Mouse, this guy, and they are known by the National Data Center intrusion in 2018. If you Google like National Data Center intrusion, pretty much you'll be finding much about this APT group. Kaspersky published a report in 2018. They haven't named the victim in this case, but they said East Asian country, which was pretty much Mongolia. And that was a totally different incident, but it was quite publicized incident. And the Lucky Mouse has been is also known as APT27, Emissary Panda, Bronze Union, Tempippo, depending upon the vendor you are dealing with. and they use the tools like PlugX, HyperPro, China Chopo, etc. They are suspected to be a Chinese-speaking group. Okay, so the last supply chain attack that we have seen recently, it has happened this spring of 2021, like 6 months ago from now. In this case, the adversary targeted a certificate authority, and the CA itself was the most popular CA in Mongolia, the biggest client base. And what they do is they digitally sign the, they issue the digital signatures to the clients. And in order to have the clients, in order to digitally sign the documents, they have to use the CA's client application. And once the adversary got into the CA's network, what they did was they have changed the client application. Embedded their malicious software in it, and it has been on their download server for HTTP download for quite a while. And we don't, there has been a lot of downloads and a lot of things, but most of them were like small and medium business entities, etc. But we don't know like who was actual like high profile target that the attacker was trying to reach. It was a very highly targeted and very sophisticated attack. The most interesting thing about this attack was that the malicious version of the client application has been served only for a few days, less than a month. So it seems like the attacker put the malicious version on the web server, and once they have reached their target, they have silently removed it from the download server, so like to remove the traces. And they were using a steganography to decrypt Cobalt Strike beacon. And yeah, so the adversary, there are some overlaps with the tools and the infrastructure with the Winty group, but we cannot really conclusively prove whether they are Winty group. So I can't really comment further than this in this situation. So as a final conclusion, based on our experience, supply chain attacks are getting more and more sophisticated. We are getting, more people getting, the supply chain attacks are getting more targeted, and the techniques they use are more sophisticated. So from us, the defender's perspective, we need to understand the threat landscape as a whole ecosystem, so that we need to include what kind of supplier or third party could be compromising us as well. So that's all my talk, and thank you very much. Is there any questions?
All right. Thank you, Ogo. That was a very interesting presentation. All, I would say, textbook, classic attack methodology, but really, painful to experience, I guess.
It is indeed.
If any of the participants have any questions for Ogo, please put them in the Q&A so that we can see it. Or if you want to raise your hand, we still have a few minutes to go through the questions. While waiting for the questions, I do have one. What was your experience in getting the collaboration from various stakeholders in dealing with some of this incident? Was it? Can you just share with us some of your experience in doing so?
So you mean like in the context of these attacks, or
yeah, in investigating, in getting information,
okay.
in figuring out what happened? What was the experience like getting the various agencies or stakeholders to cooperate?
It was an interesting one, I would say, because as I mentioned in the presentation, CERT is not a government entity, and we are pretty much like a volunteer-based non-profit organization. And what I mean, the lot of expertise we have taken from the antivirus and other vendors. So they have been very helpful and very eager to help. And some of our constituents who are more experienced were also the key players in these incidents. And it was quite an experience, I would say.
All right, thanks for that. There is a question. There's a hand up from Narayanaswamy. Do you have a question for Ogo? And if yes, you can speak. Narayanaswamy, are you there? All right, I guess not. Well, that's all the time that we have for this particular session. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to all the speakers and presenters who are with us today. And I would also like to thank Dr. Jeff for answering all of the questions in the Q&A section. He responded to all of them. And of course, if any of you would like to reach out to any of the presenters that has spoken today, feel free to do so. I'm sure they will be more than happy to talk to you or discuss further with you. So once again, thank you so much for joining us. We do have another session. We are going to take a 15-minute break. So we'll start again at 12:15 UTC +8. And yes, so I was reminded to mention to everybody that we do have a conference chat. So if you are registered, you go to the website, you can find out how to get on this conference chat. There's going to be some people there hanging out, maybe answering questions or talking to one another on this topic. But don't forget to come back at 12:15. We'd like to see you back. There are 3 more presentations from MyCERT, from TWN CERT, and also from CERT. So see you back in 15 minutes. Thank you, everyone.
Hello, Justin. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Henry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the first TC security track. We are doing session 2 right now. And for those of you who have stayed with us from the first session, we will be having 3 more presentations this time. And just let me remind you once again, if you are just joining us for this particular session, that we have a code of conduct on the APNIC 52 website. Just please be mindful of that. We'd like to ask everyone to feel free to ask questions or give any feedback to the presenters. There's a Q&A box. You can write your questions there. Don't wait until the end because as we go along, as the presenters are doing the presentation, we can see the questions coming in and we can just take it up once they finish doing the presentation. And of course, we have the conference chat as well that you can hop onto that after the session, or you can do it now if you want to. There's some people there, talking and socializing with one another. Alrighty, so let's go to the first presentation for this particular session. We have Henry from TWN CERT, TWNIC, who will be presenting a case study of Proxy Logon exploit chain in Taiwan. Henry, if you're ready, the space is yours.
Hi, thank you, Atley. Can you see the presentation slides?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Henry Chu from TWCERT CC. It's my pleasure today to share with you my presentation about Proxy Logon. So on today's agenda, I will first give a brief introduction about my organization. Then I'll talk about the Microsoft Exchange, what are some of the motives and actors behind the attack, and then about the Proxy Logon vulnerability. And lastly, I will share with the case which we came across in Taiwan. So first about TWCERT CC. So it is the critical node when it comes to incident reporting and cyber intelligence sharing in regards to Taiwan. As you can see in this diagram, there are 3 main components that comprise our cross-border cyber defense and intelligence sharing. More specifically, we receive incident reports from domestic enterprises and international partners, and then we assist the domestic enterprises to handle cyber incidents. We also collect and share cyber threat intelligence with domestic ISACs and international cybersecurity communities such as CERT and other partners. We then integrate these threat intelligence and then notify the enterprises to take preventive measures as early as possible. So as a CERT organization, we aim to improve cybersecurity wellness by reducing the impact of cybersecurity incidents. So last year alone, we have handled over 1.5 million cyber threat reports and reportings. That is on average around 125,000 reports a month. So in terms of type of cyber threats, since the intrusions were the majority and they're closely followed by the outbound attacks. Now moving on to the Microsoft Exchange. So the Microsoft Exchange is a sophisticated collaboration platform for email, calendaring, and contact. It is widely deployed in enterprises and governments globally, where according to the survey from DevCore, there were over 400,000 Exchange servers across 224 countries exposed to the internet in the beginning of this year. If you imagine, each Exchange server represents a company with confidential data stored on it, how impactful and catastrophic it would be when it is being compromised and have their data stolen. In Taiwan, there were around 400 Exchange servers affected at a time, and we had to issue an emergency advisory to urge these companies to take relevant mitigation measures. So who are behind all the attacks? There are actually several actors, and including Lucky Mouse, Tick, Calypso, Webseed, and Winty, and more. But probably the most well-known one is the Hafnium. It is a cyber espionage group based out of China. It is believed that it's a state-sponsored group that is actively involved in many exfiltration attempts. According to Microsoft, Hafnium has previously known to compromise victims by exploiting vulnerabilities in internet-facing servers, and also use legitimate open source frameworks like Covenant for command and control. Once they gain the access to the victim network, Hafnium typically exfiltrates data to file sharing sites like Mega. And they operate from the leased virtual private servers from the United States. They typically target United States law firms, higher education institutions, defense contractor, think tanks, infectious disease research organizations, and NGO. And this attack utilizes Proxy Logon is considerably, probably more devastating than the SolarWinds attacks, because Hafnium targeted small to medium-sized organizations, which they really don't have the advanced capabilities or resource to bear the attack. The observed attack on Microsoft Exchange were typically not to cause direct harm, but to steal confidential information. They usually carry out the attack with using the stolen credentials or exploit vulnerability to gain initial access. And then web shell backdoors are injected for persistent and remote access. And then the information about the victim organization is collected and sent back. So what is Proxy Logon? So as I have mentioned before, it's a very sophisticated application, and a new version were released every 3 years, dating back all the way to year 2000. And every new version introduced architectural change, as can be seen in the bottom left figure. So they had to make sure the compatibility between the new architecture with the old ones. So due to this reason, several designs based on this has led to new attack surface and Proxy Logon. The Exchange mailbox servers contain the client access service, as can be seen in the bottom right figure. This accepts client connections for all protocols and are responsible for routing and proxying connections to the corresponding backend services on the mailbox server. The front-end service contains a HTTP proxy module that picks up the HTTP request from the client side and then enrich with the internal settings, information, then forward to the request to the backend. Since the vulnerability happened in the HTTP proxy module with a logon vulnerability, so this is why this is named Proxy Logon. So Proxy Logon vulnerability was first discovered by the Taiwanese company DevCore, comprised of hacker community members. They first reported the vulnerability to Microsoft on the 5th of January. Then they released the patch on March 2nd. However, Velocity reported they have observed APT attack traffic as early as 2nd of January. So there were a lot of speculations about the possible connection between the two. However, it was later confirmed that APT was using other two known vulnerabilities in their attack methods instead of the one that's being discovered by DevCore. So Proxy Logon, you can view it as a exploit chain comprised of 4 vulnerabilities. Looking at this diagram, we can see that the exploit chain can be initiated by first sending a malicious HTTP request on port 443 to exploit the server-side request forgery vulnerability. The hacker can then be authenticated as Exchange server. From this point on, depending on the hacker's motive, they can either trigger post-authentication file write to write malicious files to any path in order to plant web shells and backdoors, or they can exploit the insecure deserialization vulnerability in the unified messaging service in order to escalate their privilege as system on the Exchange server, which gives them the right to execute arbitrary commands. If we think about this exploit chain from the hacker's point of view, you can basically send a HTTP request to gain access to the Exchange server without proper authentication. You can write any file to any path, and then you can gain system privilege to execute commands and files. You can basically do anything. So it's like a hacker's dream come true. So moving on to the case in Taiwan. So as my organization was busy issuing advisory and reporting to affected organizations, we actually received a distressed incident report from a domestic high-tech hardware enterprise about some suspicious files and network activities found on their system, and they were unable to figure out the cause behind it. This case was later confirmed as one incident case that were caused by the exploitation of Proxy Logon vulnerability. So we had the opportunity to step in and help this organization to investigate in what are the motives and what are the extent of intrusion that's being done by the hacker. We showed here a simpler version of the cyber kill chain. As you can see, you might notice the similarities between the Proxy Logon exploit chain. So it all started with the vulnerability scan for the Proxy Logon. Then a crafted server-side request is being sent to exploit the vulnerability, and then it's authenticated as the Exchange. And then we found that there were some China choppers and backdoors and their corresponding C2 key in the Exchange server configuration files. We also found in the network log that there were connections made to C2 server, receive and execute commands, collect system network and account information. And finally, these information was sent out to the C2. So we came across some IOCs during our investigation, such as the web shells, China choppers, and their keys that were injected into the Exchange OAB, the offline address book configuration file, as can be seen on the right figure with the red in the red. We also discovered suspicious HTTP requests from several known malicious IPs, and also some suspicious IP addresses with the content is crafted server-side request. And finally, we compiled a series of IOC, such as file hashes and C2 IPs that were unknown at the time and not released by the Microsoft. And we share these with both domestic and international organizations. So during our investigation, it was something interesting that we noticed. There was a PNG file, which was recently created close to the time, and no one knew anything about it, and we couldn't open it or view it or anything. But what we did is we did a P header inspection And we discovered it was actually a compressed file in disguise as the PNG file. So extracting this file further revealed 5 files containing sensitive information about the victim organization. So this includes the IP configuration of the device MAC address and ARP, which stands for Address Resolution Protocol. And that is being used for mapping dynamic IP address to permanent physical machine address in the local network. So it's rather concerning that, that when we found this, it's because if these informations are leaked, then the hacker can use this information to launch attacks such as ARP cache poisoning, spoofing, MAC flooding, or even to carry out man in the middle and denial of service attacks. In the compressed file, there are also 3 other files, namely the SAM file, which stands for Security Account Manager, the security file, and the system file. So SAM file is a rather sensitive registry hive database file in Windows that stores the user's password hashes, and it can be used to authenticate local and remote users. So it is actually very easy to crack the password from it by using the SAM dump to acquire the hash value being stored in the file, and then use password cracking tools such as John the Ripper to recover the user password. So the hacker, when they have this, they can use the password to possibly gain access to other accounts or other device, move to other device with the same username and password, and also launch further attacks. So we were able to integrate what we found so far and inform the victim organization that with high confidence, these information, including credentials and system network information, will already leaked to the hacker and are highly possible that this will be used for launching further attacks. So today we had a look at the Proxy Logon, which is known as the most severe and impactful vulnerability in Microsoft Exchange history. It is actually fundamentally an architectural problem that resulted from generations of migrating from one version to the other. Therefore, the vulnerabilities and problems that exist on the Exchange server or is still existing in the Exchange, they cannot be mitigated in one update. It is probably still a treasure colossal sunken ship waiting for hackers and researchers to discover, and incidents like this might still happen in the future. So the best practice is always to keep your Exchange server up to date, and so that as soon as they found an vulnerability and they release patch, and then you will be covered and protected. The other thing is to have firewall and ACLs so that your Exchange server is not directly exposed to the internet. If you have concerns about this vulnerability, you can acquire the latest IOCs from the Microsoft, and you can inspect your server for suspicious files by comparing the hash, and also inspect the network traffic, and if there's any suspicious backdoor script in the Exchange configuration file. Lastly, make sure that you always have a procedure so that you can always be prepared for incident response and risk recovery. So this concludes my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Henry. That was a very good presentation, very interesting as well. And especially looking back in the last few days or 1 week, we have so many vulnerabilities or critical vulnerabilities that will require a lot of organizations to keep their patches up to date as well. For the participants or attendees, if you have any questions for Henry, you can put them in the Q&A box or maybe raise your hand. I think we have 1 or 2 minutes to do that if you are interested. And while waiting for that, Henry, I have one question. You know, in your conclusion, you mentioned, you know, we should keep our systems up to date and have, you know, ACLs and all these best practices. But it's one of those advice that we keep on giving since, I don't know, since the last 20 years, maybe. In your line of work, what do you think is the main challenge for some of these organizations to do this basic, you know, hygiene, cyber hygiene work? Because it seems that every now and then we have to keep on saying the same thing over and over and over.
Thank you, Ali. That's an interesting question. I think a lot of the CERT organizations face as well. It is true that every time I put together advisory and do reporting, I always have to mention that. It's basically like a default that I just always copy and paste into the advisory. I think the main reason behind it is because even though the organization, they know they need to do this, but they don't know how serious this is. Or maybe they have some technical issues that they can't really always update their system because they might have compatibility issues with it. So what we did in TWCERT is we always have a lot of sessions and workshops and try to educate the organization as much as possible, making them realize it. Still, it's a little bit difficult to reach the small and medium or the manufacturer enterprises, since maybe they don't even have IT personnel to take care of the cybersecurity. Yeah, so I think we just need to keep educating and promoting about how important it is about the cybersecurity hygiene.
Yep. Okay. Sounds good. Yeah. So I guess people do know, but there are some other challenges that they face, and we just have to keep on pushing them to do the right thing. Well, that's all the questions that we have, I think. If we have time at the end, we can maybe revisit some of this topic, but we need to move on to the next speaker. So thank you, Henry, for joining us. So that's Henry from CERT CC. Thank you once again for participating or joining us. The next presenter is from the Malaysia CERT. Ahmad Aizuddin Aizat will be presenting about their project, the Honeypots. So Ahmad Aizuddin, if you are ready, you can share your slides.
Testing. Hello, everyone.
Hi, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. So I'm Aizuddin. So today I will share on my experience on HoneyNet deployment. So our HoneyNet project is called the LebahNet project. So a little bit about myself. So currently I'm an analyst under the Cybersecurity Research Center unit of my CERT, which is a department under the Cybersecurity Malaysia, agency of the Communication and Multimedia Ministry of Malaysia. So, okay. So, introduction to LebahNet. So basically, LebahNet is our honeypot based distributed system. So we have a few components that emulating the low interaction vulnerabilities in network services, such as SSH, Telnet, web services, MQTT, and others. So we have a public dashboard and also an ELK canvas there. So Sorry for the some issues currently for in the ELK. So since currently we have a little bit hiccup there for our Kibana, but you can still view it. So a few Lebanese architecture. So we deployed our sensors in multiple locations across the globe. So when an attacker tries to attempt an attack like a port scan or web directory enumeration, brute forcing, and others. So our sensor components will catch this, and then we will submit to our database, and then we will process it in our big data platform, and we visualize it in our reports and also in dashboards. So I will love to share on the challenges that we encounter since the inception of this project. Excuse me for a moment. Okay, so in the early days, we are utilizing the relational database such as PostgreSQL and MySQL to store our collected data from these sensors. But as many sensors are set up, there are more and more data piling up. So if we totally depending on this relational database, so it's not enough. So we redesign this so-called this Lebanet 3.0 architecture. We move to the ELK stack, to the Elasticsearch Logstash and Kibana stack to store this data. Then for sensors, so in the early days, we have utilizing a physical sensor set up on an x86 physical network devices, but now we have multiple type of sensors. Namely, we have the containerized LSD containers sensor component in VMware virtual machines. We also have optimize our Lebanet sensor to use Raspberry Pi. So just by using Raspberry Pi resources, an organization can run this Honeypot or Honeynet component. So we move starting from the Raspberry Pi 3D to Raspberry Pi 4 for these sensors. So we also set up these sensors. We also set up these sensors in some cases of our participants to their own already set up Ubuntu servers, and some deploy it in their Microsoft Hyper-V instead of using VMware Cloud. So we also set up this in public clouds and some in the private clouds of visualization, and we have physical sensors. This is the biggest deployment of our sensor, about 10 sensors deployed in a Malaysian university network. So we also have deployed these sensors in multiple public clouds such as the DigitalOcean Droplets, Microsoft Azure, for example. So just a little bit to share on what we find during this deployment. So this is about 3 months ago. But we can see the current trend of embedded devices botnet. So there are a few like the Mirai, Maris, and other example. We also see the crypto miner activities. So this is an example of Indo1 miner that a crypto mining agent to mine SMR. And also we still see the old worm like the WannaCry ransomware and also the DownAdapt or Configure still exist even though it's have been started a long day ago. So I just want to show you the dashboard. I hope I start share for a while. Okay, this is the Lebahnet dashboard. So this is a public dashboard. So as you can see here, the currently collected attack events for this month until the 15th September is about 1.7 million. So if you want to check for August, say I change it to August. So for last month, we see about, for last month alone, we see about the total attack about 3.7 million. So we have captured 318 unique binaries. So the origin from different sources, currently most from from the bots from hosted in United States, Russia, Vietnam, to name a few. And the services most targeted is the SMB host, net, Telnet, SSH, universal plug and play, and HTTPD. So mostly are Trojan, but bear in mind that some of this malware is actually categorized under 2 or 3 categories. Like, for example, the WannaCry ransomware. So it's categorized under Trojan, ransom, and also worm. So mostly we get of this Linux botnet. And then this is the 24-hour trend of attack that we see. So now it's UTC +8 is 12 o'clock. So until yesterday, you can see the trend of this is the Sabah or SMB. So I will share on the ELK canvas. Okay, everyone can see. I hope this okay. All right. So this is what we share monthly to I think to APNIC mailing list, to OIC set mailing list, and other other agencies as well. So this is example of in Kibana canvas format. You guys want to develop your own. So this is report for last month. So this is like the top attack origin. So this more focused on malware, if I'm not mistaken. So we can see the term. So this shell command is actually after the attacker try to break into this sensor, but of course it's not a real device. We emulate or we make a disguise for this, so we can see the pattern. Next, they will try to download crypto miners and other agents to run. So we can see the SSH forcing and also other forcing of other protocol as well. So this is a drill down on the activity. So we can see web attack, file upload as well. Of course, the three, the shell command, brute force, and SSH ban as well. So as I said earlier, so WannaCry still keep hitting our sensors, and we also have some Linux Trojan as well. So we can see the cryptocurrency miner as well, and also a few exploit attempts here. So I think that that's all from me today. So I return back to Adli.
Thank you, Izzuddin. That was quite interesting, especially with all the data sets that you are sharing with us. I'm sure quite a few of us in the crowd here have heard about honeypots and maybe have played with them. I have one question while waiting for questions to come in. Actually, let me check. Maybe there is a question. Yes.
Yeah,
so there is a question from Kunal.
Yeah.
Apart from requesting customers to clean up their machines or networks, how can ISPs contain malware activities and malware distributing subscribers?
So we have another project, a part of this LeBarNet. It was called CMAP, the Coordinated Malware Eradication and Remediation Project. For this project, we deploy another sensor, but this is a active sensor compared to a honeypot. So it's more like the BDS agent, the breach detection system agent. So in this, we will direct this. If we deploy it in ISP, we can redirect this the organization to to a sinkhole or to a wall garden. So if they after they clean up their machine, then we will allow them to go back or to return to normal internet connection. So it's a 3.7 million attack as a total overtime. So the comparison between the LeBarNet dashboard and also the ALK. So the differences is the 3.7 million is actually the connection data, and the 600,000 is actually event. So in one event, they have about more than 10 connections. So that's why the numbers are different. It's the differentiation between how we count the total. In the LeBarNet dashboard, we count connection. In the LK, we count the event. So in one event, they have a multiple connection. So that's why the data differences exist. So any more questions?
Thank you for clarifying that. There is no more question, but I'm sure people would probably like to ask you more, and they can email you directly or speak to you separately, I hope. So thank you so much for the presentation and for sharing with us. We will move to the next presentation now. And the last but not least presentation will be from Suetena Loya from Samoa CERT. And he will be sharing some perspectives of being the new CERT in the region. So Suetena, if you are ready, you can start your presentation.
Thanks, Adli. First of all, I'd like to, am I audible? Can you hear me? So thanks, Adli, for that tag in. So first of all, I want to thank APNIC and the cybersecurity community of the Pacific for allowing SAMCERT to present at this wonderful conference, APT 52. So I'm from the Ministry of Communication and Information Technology, where SAMCERT is housed. So I'll be talking about an experience from a young CERT in the region. So SAMCERT is from Samoa. Now, this is a small island in the Pacific, not far from New Zealand, Australia, and the Asia community. We are made up of 2 islands, lush with forest and the ocean beauty and waters. And we are quite happy with where we are, and given that our remote location has given us protection in terms of COVID, we are also not safe online, hence why the establishment of SAMCERT. So in a geographical location, Samoa is about 5 hours from Honolulu and 5 hours from Sydney or Brisbane, and 3.5 hours from Auckland, New Zealand. So if you're hip hopping across the Pacific from Asia or from Europe, those are your entry point to Samoa. We also go through Fiji, which you can also get flights from there, but we are more than happy to welcome you in the next conference if it's held anywhere close to Samoa. So apart from that, SAMCERT was established and it was operationalized in May 2021 this year, so which makes it 5 months old. It's still a baby, but through that, the Ministry of Communication Information Technology have been working with a lot of its partners in the cybersecurity realm to build Samoa's cybersecurity profile. And throughout the years, a lot of initiatives have been made in terms of partnerships, as well as trainings and awareness, which included support from APNIC and the various other partners, such as Paxson and so forth. So SAMCERT is an entity that sits under the Ministry of Communication. It provides responses to both public and private sector incidents. So it is a national CERT. Some of the areas that SAMCERT focuses on is incident response management and coordination, and cyber awareness, cyber security advice and support on a monthly basis, as well as if the need arises. It provides cybersecurity bulletins as well as advisories to both public and private through its website. It also works with various other stakeholders within the domestic realm to actually push out awareness, and part of those awareness go with the support of media, such as video, posters, and pamphlets that are distributed to all communities. Areas that SAMCERT actually provide advice on in terms of cybersecurity is our Samoa National Broadband Highway Network, which is one of the biggest networks in Samoa, owned by government and run by government. We also have the luxury of having 3 submarine cables within Samoa, so which provides resilience in terms of internet connectivity and resource access to online resources outside Samoa. And other areas also include government networks across different sectors and government systems, and user support to the populations through people, business, and organizations that request for SAMCERT's assistance. Some of our partners in the domestic area as well is our ISPs and telcos, which we also respond to and provide advice on and work together in terms of resolving certain issues, both technical and cybersecurity related. So who does SAMCERT report to? Basically, the government of Samoa decided to build its cybersecurity strategy, and part of that strategy from 2016 to 2021, right this year, so currently there's a review on that, was to build this SAMCERT. So it reports to the Digital Transformation Council, which is chaired by the Honorable Prime Minister, the Cybersecurity Subcommittee for the National Security Committee, which overlooks the national security of the country. All cybersecurity incidents and reports are reported to the Cabinet for their understanding and their recommendation in terms of cross-sectoral and government and nationwide requirements in terms of strengthening cybersecurity for the nation. Even though SAMCERT is a small and young CERT, it does not, it's not immune from cyber threats. So therefore, a few months ago, or 2 months ago, or a month ago, August, SAMCERT was given the responsibility of handling an incident that was requested in terms of support from one of the government ministries within the government. So SAMCERT coordinated this response. Even though it had minimum resources, it focused more on its coordination aspect in terms of where does it need to get the technical support, who does it need to get the technical support from. And from here, SAMCERT reached out to what is called the Technical Working Group for Government, which is really all IT support heads across governments in Samoa for their assistance, as well as regional partners who had the capacity on the technical level to assist. Some of these partners include APNIC, Trustwave, the Paxson community, and many others. Also, the assistance of our telcos and service providers to this agency was also heavily recognized in terms of the support they provide and the information they had in coordinating this incident was well received in terms of the information and infrastructure that they understood. So faced with that incident, we had to try to find a way to mitigate the spread of this ransomware called Black Bytes. And initial work by TWG was to analyze, segment, and move all infected machines into a quarantine network. And from there, the recovery process started. This took a few hours in terms of securing all the recovery needs, but it took a few weeks in terms of getting things back to normal. So these are our partners within the region. There are others that provide contribution, but we believe that these are the ones that SAMCERT is working with and will be working with in the future. So we have Paxson, APNIC, CERT-NZ, Trustwave, Facebook, Get Safe Online, OCSC, Wordsman Keen, ACSC, GFCE, and so forth. So what is there for SAMCERT and the areas of focus for its future? Currently, the team is reviewing its cybersecurity strategy because the current one is close to expiring, which would end this year. Developing a national cybersecurity policy, developing a national cybersecurity legislation, and continuing the build in terms of the technical capacity of SAMCERT and its human resources, and maintaining and building new regional and international partnerships, as well as building its cybersecurity influence in the domestic space through community groups such as CETA, the Coffee Club, or basically the digital think tank that includes the telcos, and other ISPs and players within the digital realm in Samoa, strengthening its contribution to the cybersecurity community in terms of awareness and capacity building engagement, both domestic and regional. So on that note, I would like to thank everyone for their time and attention. And I think that's threat that has been mitigated. Tough tight.
All right, thank you, Swetena, for the presentation. I see that there's a lot of things on your plate there on the work that needs to be done moving forward. But also interesting to hear that you have had your first taste of handling a ransomware incident. We have a few more minutes before we can conclude the session. So I'd like to welcome our participants to ask questions or give some feedback to Swetena if you have any. Just place your question in the chat box, in the Q&A box, and we'll take up the question with Swetena. In the meantime, Swetena, I have a question for you. And this is just digging back to what you've mentioned about the ransomware incident. What was the biggest challenge in handling that incident? So since you are a new team, and perhaps not many other stakeholders are familiar with incident response and dealing with this particular threat, what was the biggest challenge that you faced, if you can share with us in dealing with that particular incident?
I think one of the biggest challenge was communication-wise, managing that communication aspect in terms of the type of information that could be shared, and also because of things happening and things not functioning in the way it should be. People are asking questions and trying to bring out what would be the best answer to reply to them in terms of what has happened. Because it was a ransomware incident, you couldn't really just tell them like we've lost everything and we're trying to recover them. Also looking at the people that you need to report to, like not getting the wrong message that this is a big problem, that it's actually happened, and that just trying to control the narrative in terms of calming everyone down and providing reasonable answers to certain questions that could hinder the incident response management work.
So there are two more questions here that is somewhat related to the first one. So one is from Michael. He said, great presentation, Swetena. What did you draw confidence from when you reflect upon the incident? And I'm going to link this up with a question from Clay. Thanks for the excellent preso. Could you share some lessons learned or unexpected twist from your first incident? So can you respond to those two?
So I think the confidence part, basically, it's a lot of mental engagements through previous awareness programs that were conducted in cybersecurity, as well as areas that we had experienced before. I mean, even though this was our first incident for CERT, it wasn't our first incident for Samoa. There were other similar cases that we also pivoted from, using the support of the Technical Working Group for Government. And because of the ongoing emphasis on cybersecurity awareness, a lot of the technical working group had initial understanding of what was expected of such a cyber incident, and things to note in terms of who should respond, where to go, who provides authorization for interactions, and so forth. So I think some of the lessons learned is basically building that community of trust. I think building that community of trust goes a long way, even before you actually have a CERT, but continuing to build that on multiple levels, whether it's business or whether it's technical groups, but continuing that open dialogue. I mean, using things like the traffic protocols, traffic light in terms of coordinating and sharing information. Also, information sharing also helps. As one of my friends usually likes to say, it's always good to share things peer to peer, which is like go to the pub, share a beer, share advice, share some of the content that you've learned, some of the content that they learned, some of the pros and cons that on things that they saw worked that they saw might not work. Yeah, so I think those are the pluses, is knowing your capacity and knowing where you need to ask for help, building that community of trust, and basically growing your network of influence, both internally and through your partnerships with those who you get engaged with, such as the Paxton community, the APNIC community, and so forth, and just building that the pool of experts that you will need to call on in terms of an incident that you might not have the capacity to provide support for nationally.
All right, thanks for that. There's two more. One from Georgia, who asked, for other CERTs in the region that is also just starting out or beginning, what is one piece of advice you can give them, or you'd give them? And was there a challenge that you had to overcome that you didn't initially foresee?
I think some of the challenges is usually the people side, but for that reason, basically having strong leadership, strong leaders that can influence that change. For Samoa, it was our prime minister, and from there, the drive for cyber security to be strengthened was the important part. They also they noted that you could get everything right, but if you don't get cybersecurity right, then what's the use of everything else? Because everything is fundamentally broken if cybersecurity broken. So I think that's what I would say in terms of that. But my advice for the region is building those communities of support. If you are a country looking at building a CERT, start small. You don't need a big.
Okay. Another question here from Jeff, Dr. Jeff. With the ransomware incident, was it a targeted attack? And what might have been the reason as to why the ransomware attack was successful? Sultana, you there?
Yes.
Okay. Did you hear the question?
Which question was that one?
The ransomware one. Was it a targeted attack? And what might be the reason that led to the attack to be successful?
So I don't think it was a targeted attack. I think it was just that it was pure coincidence that it happened with that agency, and then from there, I think certain areas that that were included in the report that we had submitted was that there were configuration issues. I think those configuration issues led to the ransomware being activated and propagating within the confines that it was propagating in.
All right. And one last question here from Robbie. He is asking, you are relatively new to the CERT field. What skills have been important from your previous career in ICT and in your new role?
So I think one of the skills that played great importance in cybersecurity is knowing your resources, having those resources mapped somewhere, and also having those understanding of what kind of technology that you have in your network. And basically, because it's a new CERT, one of the skills that would be very important is having good communications with your communities and having good communication with your peers, getting the right information out there. So basically having that communication element of your technical understanding and trying to dumbify certain areas of it to the point where people can understand how SAM CERT or any CERT could assist in the technical areas.
Thank you, Sotena. So everybody, that's all the time that we have for today for the security track. We'll see you again, perhaps at the next conference. But I'd like to thank all the speakers once again from the first session and from the second session for being here with us and for sharing some insights and observations and experience. And hopefully some of those will be benefited by all. And last but not least, I would like to thank all of the participants as well for being with us today. And please enjoy the rest of the conference. And one thing that I would like to add is there's a poll, and if you can give your ratings to the session that you just attended, that will be really, really useful for us. One other thing that I would like to mention, actually two more. One is that we have a cybersecurity quiz tomorrow. Please come and join and win some prizes. And of course, hop on the conference chat to socialize and chat with other participants and perhaps speakers as well. So thank you so much and have a good day and keep safe, everybody. See you next time. Bye-bye.